Imagine a sudden, sharp heat rising from the pit of your stomach, climbing up your chest until it settles as a thick, heavy throb right behind your ribs. Your mouth goes dry, your palms feel damp against the cold stone or the rough bark of a tree, and for a moment, the world around you, the rustle of the leaves, the smell of the wood smoke, the distant howl of a predator, simply vanishes. You are focused on one person. Your heart is hammering against your chest wall like a trapped bird, a physical sensation so violent it feels like it might actually bruise you from the inside. This is the biological hit of romantic attraction. It is a feeling you know, but here is the mystery that has kept anthropologists and evolutionary biologists awake for decades. Is that heat in your chest a modern invention, a luxury of a comfortable civilization, or did a hunter-gatherer 30,000 years ago feel that exact same bruising throb? We like to imagine the ancient past as a cold, clinical place of raw survival, where people were too busy not dying to worry about something as frivolous as a soulmate. But here is a mystery that took researchers a century to crack. The evidence for ancient love isn't just a nice-to-have theory. It is written into our bones, our genomes, and the very dirt of our ancestors' graves. However, if you think those ancient people were just like us but in furs, you are missing the first major clue in this investigation. The common theory for a long time was the transaction model. This idea suggested that ancient humans didn't fall in love in the way we describe it. Instead, they made trades. A male provided meat and protection, a female provided reproductive capability and gathered plants. It was a business arrangement. In this version of history, the concept of love was a social construct invented by troubadours in the Middle Ages or perhaps by the Greeks. We've been told that for 99% of human history, we were essentially high-functioning apes following a script of purely genetic self-interest. If that were true, the crime scene of prehistory should look very different. We should see evidence of temporary pairings, a total lack of specialized care for the weak, and burials that are nothing more than waste disposal. But as soon as we started digging, the transaction model began to fall apart. On the contrary, when we look at the actual physical evidence left behind in the soil, we find scenes that defy clinical explanation. In 2007, near Mantua, Italy, archaeologists unearthed a site known as Valdaro. They found two skeletons, a male and a female, both roughly 20 years old. They weren't just buried near each other. They were locked in a permanent embrace. They were facing each other, arms wrapped around one another, legs intertwined. This wasn't a double burial where bodies were placed side by side for convenience. These people, who lived 6,000 years ago, were positioned this way intentionally by the people who loved them, or perhaps they died in that position. When the lead archaeologist, Elena Maria Menotti, examined the remains, she found no evidence of a violent death. No arrowheads, no blunt force trauma. They were two young people who ended up in a hole together, holding on for dear life. If love is a modern invention, why did the people of the Neolithic period go to such lengths to preserve a gesture of intimacy? Actually, the mystery goes even deeper than a single hug in the dirt. To understand if these people felt the heat of love, we have to look at the brain, the primary scene of the crime. Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist at Rutgers University, has spent years putting people in love into fMRI machines to see what's happening in their heads. She discovered that romantic love isn't an emotion in the way we think of sadness or joy. It's a drive. It's an ancient neural circuitry located in the ventral tegmental area and the caudate nucleus. These are the reward centers of the brain, the same parts that respond to thirst, hunger, and extreme cravings. This part of the brain is incredibly primitive. It's part of the reptilian core that existed long before we developed the logic to write poetry. Fisher's research suggests that the chemical cocktail of dopamine, norepinephrine, and oxytocin that creates the love sensation is millions of years old. If the hardware is that ancient, it means that the man stalking a mammoth across the Siberian tundra wasn't just thinking about calories. He was likely experiencing the same obsessive, dopamine-fueled intrusive thoughts about a specific person that you do when you're waiting for a text back, but that chemical evidence still doesn't explain the why. If love is just a biological bribe to get us to reproduce, why does it last so much longer than the act of reproduction itself? This brings us to a clue found in the Shanidar cave in Iraq. There, researchers found the remains of a Neanderthal known as Shanidar I, or Nandi. Nandi lived about 45,000 years ago, and his life was a disaster. He had a massive blow to the side of his face that likely left him blind in one eye. His right arm was withered and had been amputated at the elbow. He had a debilitating limp. In a survival of the fittest world, Nandi should have been abandoned before he reached puberty. Instead, the evidence shows he lived to be nearly 50 years old. That is an eternity for a Neanderthal. He couldn't hunt, he couldn't run, and he couldn't defend the group. The only reason Nandi survived was that someone, or a group of someones, loved him. They chose to carry him, to feed him, and to protect him for decades with no hope of a return on investment. This is what biologists call non-reciprocal altruism. And in the human experience, we usually just call it love. Nevertheless, if you think this kind of care was common across all groups, the genetic record offers a startling contradiction. In 2015, a study led by Dr. Monica Carmen and over 100 other researchers examined the Y chromosomes of people from across the globe. They found a bottleneck that occurred about 7,000 years ago. For a period of 2,000 years, for every 17 women who reproduced, only one man did. This suggests a period of extreme social inequality, where a few powerful men likely had many partners, and most men had none. This sounds like the opposite of romantic love. It sounds like a system of harems and power. If love was the dominant drive, why does the DNA show such a massive imbalance? This is the false lead of our investigation. It suggests that while the capacity for love existed, it was often crushed by the realities of social hierarchy and the struggle for resources. Love wasn't the default state of every relationship. It was a fire that had to be protected from the wind of a very harsh world. Yet, even in the middle of those brutal hierarchies, we see the wow factor of human obsession. Let's look at the Sungir burials in Russia, dating back 30,000 years. Archaeologists found two children, a boy and a girl, buried head to head. They were draped in thousands of mammoth ivory beads. To give you a sense of the scale, researchers estimate that each single bead took about 45 minutes to carve. There were over 10,000 beads in that grave. That is roughly 7,500 hours of labor. If you spent 40 hours a week doing nothing but carving ivory beads, it would take you nearly 4 years to finish that burial. This isn't just ritual. This is a massive, staggering investment of time and energy into two people who were already dead. This is the hallmark of human love, the refusal to let go. It is the need to scream, "This person mattered," into the void of time. The people who buried those children didn't do it because it helped them survive. They did it because they were devastated. In spite of the tragedy in the dirt, our investigation has to look at the living. How did they actually date? We don't have recorded Tinder profiles from the Pleistocene, but we have the next best thing, jewelry. About 75,000 years ago in Blombos Cave in South Africa, humans began making beads out of nacreous shells. They weren't practical, they didn't keep you warm, and they didn't help you kill a gazelle. They were for display. Evolutionary psychologists, like Dr. Jeffrey Miller, argue that these were fitness indicators. But they weren't just showing off health, they were showing off creativity and personality. We see a shift from "I am strong" to "I am unique." This is the beginning of the mating mind, where humans began to look for partners who shared their aesthetic, their humor, and their symbolic world. We weren't just looking for a mate, we were looking for someone who got us. This is the root of the companionate love that we value today. Still, there is the question of the broken heart. If ancient humans felt love, did they feel the crushing weight of its loss? For this, we look at the Hassanlu lovers from Iran, dating back to 800 BC. They were found in a grain bin, likely hiding during the destruction of their city. They died of asphyxiation. The male has his arm around the female, and she is reaching out her hand to touch his face, her fingers resting near his lips. They are frozen in a final kiss. There is a specific kind of silence in a find like that. It tells us that in the final moments of life, when the walls were literally closing in, their instinct wasn't to look for a way out or to fight. Their instinct was to provide comfort to the one person who made life worth living. This isn't a modern romantic movie trope. It is a 3,000-year-old skeleton. In contrast to that tragic image, we have to ask if love was actually a survival disadvantage. Wouldn't a person who didn't care about anyone be more likely to survive a famine? If you don't share your food with a sick partner or a weak child, you have more for yourself. This is the efficiency trap. But humans have a unique problem. Our babies are born completely helpless. A horse can walk within an hour of birth. A human takes a year. Because of our massive brains, our infants require years of intense, high-calorie care. A single mother in the Pleistocene would have had a nearly impossible time gathering enough food while protecting a totally dependent infant from predators. The love solution was the answer. By creating a chemical bond so strong that it felt like a physical addiction, nature ensured that two people would stay together long enough to raise a child to some level of independence. Love isn't a luxury. It's the biological glue that kept our species from going extinct. We didn't fall in love because we were soft. We fell in love because we had to be a team to survive the hard world. Interestingly, this teamwork led to a strange evolution in our physical appearance. Unlike most primates, humans have whites in our eyes, known as the visible sclera. This allows us to see exactly where another person is looking. It makes it impossible to hide our focus. Why would we evolve a feature that gives away our secrets? Because it builds trust. It allows for shared intentionality. You can look at a partner across a fire and know exactly what they are thinking without saying a word. This level of intimacy is a prerequisite for love. We also lost our estrus cycle. Unlike chimpanzees, human females don't have a visible physical signal for when they are fertile. This is known as concealed ovulation. Many biologists believe this evolved to encourage pair bonding. If a male doesn't know exactly when a female can conceive, he has to stay with her all the time to ensure he is the father. This leads to the home base model of human society, staying together, sharing food, and developing a deep, long-term emotional connection. On the other hand, we can't ignore the dark matter of ancient love, the jealousy. If love is an addiction, then the loss of it is a withdrawal. Forensic archaeology has found countless examples of ancient crimes of passion. In a site in Nataruk, Kenya, researchers found the remains of 27 hunter-gatherers who were massacred 10,000 years ago. Among the bodies was a woman in the late stages of pregnancy, her hands and feet likely bound. While this was a war between groups, many of the injuries in ancient remains across the world show interpersonal violence, broken noses, healed rib fractures, and skull trauma that suggest face-to-face conflict. Evolutionary psychologist David Buss has argued that jealousy is the shadow of love. It is the defensive mechanism designed to protect the bond. The fact that we see evidence of these intense emotional conflicts in the deep past is, ironically, further proof that the bonds were incredibly strong. You don't fight that hard over someone you don't deeply value. Actually, the most compelling evidence for ancient love might be found in the things they didn't do. When we look at the Upper Paleolithic Revolution about 40,000 years ago, we see a sudden explosion of art, music, and complex burial. We find flutes made of bird bone and mammoth ivory. We find cave paintings that require deep collaboration and hours of standing in the dark with flickering fat lamps. Why would they do this? Some say it was for magic or religion, but much of it looks like storytelling. It looks like a culture that was obsessed with the human experience. And you cannot tell the story of the human experience without the central pillar of attachment. When we find a necklace made of fox teeth, all matched for size and color, given to a young woman in a burial in the Czech Republic 25,000 years ago, we are looking at a gift. We are looking at an ancient human who spent days hunting and preparing a token of affection. That necklace is the ancient equivalent of a diamond ring or a carefully curated playlist. However, we must be careful not to project all of our modern Hollywood expectations onto the past. Ancient love was likely much more communal than our version. In many modern hunter-gatherer societies, like the Hadza or the Kung, love is often shared among a wider network. But even in these groups, pair bonds are the bedrock. They have words for the act of being away from a partner. They have songs about the beauty of a specific person. The mystery isn't whether they felt it. The mystery is why we ever thought they didn't. We have this strange temporal narcissism where we think we are the first generation to truly feel deeply. We look at the past in black and white, assuming their lives were just a series of grunts and struggles. But the biology doesn't lie. Their brains were identical to ours. Their dopamine receptors were the same. Their oxytocin levels spiked when they held their children or touched their partners. The verdict of our investigation is clear. Love is not a cultural software that was recently downloaded into our brains. It is the hardware itself. We are the descendants of the people who loved the most intensely, the ones who didn't care, the ones who didn't bond, and the ones who didn't protect their partners were the ones whose lineages died out in the freezing dark of the Ice Age. You exist because your ancestors were addicted to each other. They felt that same heat in the chest, that same dry mouth, and that same bruising throb of the heart. They looked at each other across fires that have been cold for 10,000 years and felt the exact same hit of recognition that you feel today. On the contrary, there's one final, chilling piece of evidence that suggests love might be more than just a survival mechanism. It's found in the sheer unnecessary beauty of their mourning. At the School Cave in Israel, researchers found a burial from 100,000 years ago. A woman was buried with a large boar's jawbone placed in her arms. Think about the effort required to hunt a wild boar, a dangerous and aggressive animal, just to place a piece of it in a grave. This wasn't for food, it was a symbol. It was a message to the afterlife, or a message to the living. It was an act of extravagant grief. If love were just about raising children, it should end when the person dies. But it doesn't. We keep loving people long after they are gone, sometimes for the rest of our lives. This persistent attachment is a biological glitch if you're a robot, but it's the core of what it means to be human. We are a species that refuses to accept the boundaries of death. So the next time you feel that sudden, sharp heat rising in your chest when you look at someone you love, don't think of it as a modern feeling. Think of it as an echo. It is a biological haunting, a signal sent to you from a person who lived in a cave or a hut tens of thousands of years ago. They are telling you that the world is cold and the predators are many, but the heat in your chest is the only thing that has ever truly kept the dark at bay. It is a drive so powerful it has rewritten the surface of the earth and the code of our DNA. We are not just animals that reproduce. We are the lovers of Valdaro, forever locked in an embrace that the dirt could not break. The case for ancient love is closed, but it leaves us with a haunting question. If love is an ancient biological trap designed to keep us together in a dangerous world, what happens to it now that the world is no longer that dangerous? We no longer need a partner to protect us from saber-toothed tigers or to help us gather enough tubers to survive the winter. We have central heating, grocery stores, and police forces. Yet, that bruising throb in your chest hasn't gone away. It hasn't evolved out of us. This suggests that love isn't just a tool we used to get here. It's the reason we wanted to get here in the first place. Our ancestors didn't survive just because they were strong. They survived because they had something worth surviving for. They were obsessed with each other, and you are the result of that obsession. Remember that physical sensation from the beginning. The heat, the dry mouth, the heart hammering like it's trying to break through your ribs, that isn't just an emotion. It is a physical tether to a lineage of survivors who felt that exact same bruising pressure in their own chests while they watched the sun set over a world we can't even imagine. It is a heavy, definitive argument from the past that you are never truly alone in your feelings. You are simply the latest person to fall into a biological trap that was set 60,000 years ago. It's a chilling thought, isn't it? That your most private, most intense feelings are just a script written by people who have been dust for millennia. But if that's true, then it means that every time you fall in love, you are performing an ancient ritual that has successfully defied extinction. If you want to keep exploring these deep human mysteries, I'd love to have you along for the next investigation. Feel free to subscribe and join our search for what makes us who we are. What do you think? Is love a trap or a triumph? Let me know in the comments. After all, that heat in your chest is the only reason any of us are here to talk about it at all.